Hello world, Frida, Reba, Darcy, and Patricia O'Connor here. Oh, by the way, it's the bonsai balcony whenever I do Saturday Night Live bonsai. And I'm sitting at the couch. Excuse me. Those are my lights. That's a China ball with a 100 watt LED. It's on a dimmer. I can turn that up or down however I need to. And it's a daylight bulb in there. And I wouldn't recommend a 100 watt bulb in a paper lantern if it weren't an LED. A practical, an incandescent bulb would be a little risky if it got hot in a paper lantern. And this poor looking thing is my bounce light, which is actually a really good source for bounce light. A little bit about that. Today is December 25th. It's Christmas Day, sir. And on the bonsai balcony, it is a little overcast. It's cool out today. I did a little bit of wiring last night on that small ponderosa because I had removed some more earlier, and some of those branches were hanging down, and it was beginning. I may lose a couple of them. I don't know if I got to them in time or not, but some of this littler stuff was starting to really shed needles, and some of this other stuff seriously considered cutting that back, but I decided to put the wire back to it and point it up and see if it back buds. Oaks are looking good. Ponderosa is looking good. Everybody is getting watered way more than they need to, and today the show is about why my pond looks yellow. Why do all my ponds look yellow? Well, it is finally here in the Bay Area of my garden where I'm located. It's finally winter. And in winter, pines take a little bit of a different look. And that can be spooky, scary, even if you're just looking at the pine trees in the neighborhood. You think, why are those suddenly... I've got a lot of yellow on this guy. I've got quite a bit of yellow on this guy. You can look through here and see the overall color is a mixture of a couple of things. Yellow, hard green, and some purple. And that's new. The purple that I'm seeing throughout here is something that I haven't had before. That's cold. That's cold damage. You see that on cactus, you see that on perennials, you see that. It's things that are get cold damage tend to turn purple. So that's a little bit about that. But what we're looking at right now is just what the trees do. Pines particularly do have their winter color, which is different than their summer color. And the difference is they do get a little yellow, or they do get, their winter color is not the same. Their winter color after they've gone dormant, or whatever the closest thing to dormancy they have is never going to be the same as their true summer color. So it's not a reason to just say you can't, totally dismiss that. But on the other hand, a lot of this isn't on us. This is just the way things are. When spring comes around, the same this that makes everything so bright and green, and everybody tells me how green our garden looks. It's the same this that's making everything yellow right now. And that's just kind of a part of it. Try not to worry about it too much. Take it on a tree-by-tree basis. Is there something more to that when you look at your trees than that? Or are they just going through? Is that just their winter color? So yeah, and here's a little quick look at the video we shot last weekend. The sound quality on that started off iffy and got worse. That's okay. It was basically a visual of us pruning back. Y'all have heard me say, I think the part where I got into my explanations was more heavily leaning on the going in. So by the time that I got farther away from the camera and farther away from the microphone and started getting less we were just catching up. So if you missed something, you probably just missed the gossip part of the program, which is, it's okay. It'll be okay. But that's on me. Sorry about that. Also, looking at these guys, we're looking at these ball cypress here, and we're seeing them as they are in their bare state. It's a good time to talk about taper, some tempting do's and don'ts when it comes to taper. So the building of this compilation, but that's not really a matter of it being a compilation, doesn't have anything to do with it. The building of these three trees, the building of these cypress trees as formal uprights, has to do with taking a tree that at that diameter right there, that would have been, 15, 20 foot tall tree. So that's not bonsai, right? So what they did was they cut it down to 2 or 3 feet. Also, this was a couple of years ago when it was like that big around. It's got a little fatter since then. We've been feeding everybody. So what they first do is you chop the tree across. You don't make a cut like this. You chop the tree. You come up to your tree that's in the field. Before you bring it in, you do your, this was done up here, but just because to get out of that area for the demonstration, you would make your first cut. Whoop, right there. Put a little cut paste on it perhaps. Then what the tree will do is it will respond to that because it's just lost all of that auxin, all of that hormonal allocation is now going multiple directions, and the tree will respond in a way that it will put out buds all over, and all of those buds, even closer to the top, are going to want to be the next apex, so it'll start putting out shoots like this. At that point, I would pick out one. It could be you, right? So our tree was cut, boom, right there, and then this shoot came out. So I would then come around here with a piece of wire twice, and then using this as my anchor, and wrap it around this little limb, and then point that guy straight up. Like we did this, and this, and that, and that. After we take that guy straight up, I would then make this angle cut. This is going to be the beginning of our taper. Now, at a glance, when this widens out so much that it takes up all of that, and this rollover is gone, and this basically more cleanly feeds into this, that's when our job is done. By dividing that large one up into twos, that was an aesthetic thing. But I also think by the dividing it into two, I get the two tops. I get more energy going through there and stuff. But also, each one of those has to roll over, I think, half as much to finish the show when it comes to that tree. So I kind of think that might be working in my favor, but I can't take credit for that as an idea. I didn't do that to spare the clock. I don't know that having to grow two tops is any faster than growing one either. So, there's that to be said. But what we have here is, and then also, last year, I went back and the wood in here in the center was out like this, and the rollover was approaching. And I didn't want the rollover to go growing over what was a factory-made flat cut, a saw blade flat cut. So I took some power tools and some hand tools, and I scooped out this area. It's not totally level, or it's not totally flat. It doesn't need to be. The shape will be controlled by this rollover, which is also getting excessive. At some point, I will want to maybe cut this back some and let it approach again. I think, and I've had it said, but I haven't experimented with this enough times to know to what degree it's true, but that rollover can slow down over time, and you just might be looking at some dead wood, and the rollover says, "Yeah, no, we're okay." So cleaning out this inside edge and making this new again is something that people do to increase the speed of the rollover. And if you just leave this in, cut here, and then take the first sprout that comes out from that and wire that up, you're not making taper, you're making some really flat machine cut that you're going to have to deal with at some point. Better to at least make it in the shape of a tree, make it in the shape of taper, and then allow your rollover to start working for you. These guys roll over. This has happened. It hasn't been. I would say 9 months that we just did this, and that is a good deal of. I'm peeling that paste away because it's no longer needed. All of this rollover is totally. This amount of rollover is totally all but cured that chop. Now, what I might consider doing is elongating this chop on down, because I'm making taper from this to this in an area that's that big. It might be said that to increase the taper area over there, over an area of just over 6 inches or something, instead of just a couple, would give that a more elegant shape. Now, last time when I was getting ready to do this, I thought about it a whole lot. And I'd also seen people do things with their saws to address their taper, and I was very curious how that turned out. But in the end, I didn't see any follow-up. Speaking of taper, this buttress bottom kind of comes up here. Man, that's already doing so much for us, So here's what. It would be almost tempting to take a saw. And this is what I was considering doing. I didn't really consider it. This is what I was wondering about last time. And my imagination played that out in my head, and I decided it was probably a no-no. Didn't do it. Just decided I probably didn't like the sound of it. There's just something seemed off about it. But here's what I'm talking about. Since this has to become this, it seemed to me, or to one train of thought, to make your saw cut or your sanding cut come from here and come out down to here. Just, start and then come from here and then funnel that back out farther down. Make this wedge just flute right on down to this shape. I have seen that done, and it basically, once you back away with your tools in hand and see what you've done, you sort of make a four-sided pyramid that's elongated, and that is so much rollover that you will have increased your workload significantly, and you would run the risk of killing the vein, because then the only uncarved living thing for the energy to go through, the only part of the tree, the trunk, for the energy to go through would be that one part that you didn't shave. If you tried to shave that into that shape, you might run the risk of just losing the top altogether. So that's what we're looking at. Meanwhile, the smallest tree is starting to pull up to the barn a little bit. I'm looking at the small one here. We can kind of see how our taper is supposed to work out there, and it's working out there pretty well. We're getting there, and that's pretty busy there. I should reconsider. And then there's a lot to reconsider. Lucky for me, these trees grow really, really fast. I've got a debate going on about ramification. This is just something I'm playing out in my head. I've been cutting these trees. I had to rebuild this one, and I've had to rebuild this one, and I finally got them to put out the branch structure that I like. And I did that by increasing the watering. I didn't take the word drought hardy as a license to not water it. I just started watering it more and then started feeding it more. And then I started pruning back the tips on all the branches. And the end result is that it bushed out more. I would cut those back early and short rather than let them elongate out. And what I wasn't doing is I probably should have known more to do the tips, just to do the tips, because that would keep them from elongating out also. But what I kept doing is turning my 1s into 2s, my 2s into 4s, my 4s into 8s. But I was doing it early and short. So I've got a lot of tertiary ramification going on here, but it's so thick it can't even be seen. And by the time I get out to a canopy size, I thought that'd be cool. Now I'm looking at it and I'm going, you're just going to keep building that except farther out. And it might be that if I just kept building that except farther out, and then at that point I went in through there and started making choices again, I might be able to get something where I could see into the tree. But I think, and you're starting to see where I'm letting some of these branches grow long, these are my experiment into what would have happened had I let them grow a little longer earlier. Can always cut those back, but those could also be replacements for what I see working in the future if I figure out that that's better. Same here. I like what we've got going here. Look, this is a really good example. This is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. We've got some really cool little lattice work here. Not exactly what cypress trees do in the wild, but yeah, what cypress trees do in the wild is this right here. Every one of those would end up being, enormously long in proportion to the shape of the tree. And next year, a third of them wouldn't be there, but then 2/3 more would grow in their place. And then at the end of the first winter, part of those would die off, and then the next year, part of those wouldn't be there, but they would be replaced again. It constantly replaces these with more of these. And that's what they really do. And they're beautiful. They're a beautiful look. I could just as easily, instead of doing this and making all this ramification, I could cut all of these back and in a couple of years have those replaced with sleeky little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm thinking that I will get to keep the branches longer if I ramify them. If I ramify them, it'll take a little longer for this to get too fat. Yeah, so that's the reason behind ramifying the branches on my bald cypress trees, even though that's not something that you actually tend to see them do out in the wild. They grow so fast and are so prolific, there's no reason why not to give it a try. And okay, so this spring and this summer, we'll see these branches grow out. And the rest of the tree is going to be a little unruly because I'm not going to cut back any of the new growth. But if we just kind of picture that back and look and see how we're doing, we can better decide whether or not we think we're making something that's going to be elegant and sustainable as far as the artistic design of the tree, or whether or not we should cut our losses and knock the fat stuff off, and then just every third year maybe replace. Whenever one of these gets that big, replace it with one that's more of this size. That's basically, you could do that, always have a third limb in the wings, which is kind of what you would have to do with the crown of a bald cypress anyway. It's going to get too fat up there at some point as a show design tree, and you're going to have to go through there and go, and then take your next branch and cut it up. And then you're going to be off the tour for a minute while it makes that top a year or two, whatever. So that is a quick look at taper. Taper is something that we make with saws and axes and sanders and chisels. I've got a lot to learn about deadwood, but I'm really looking forward to learning a lot about deadwood. And so yeah, that's what's going on there. Those are my thoughts on the woodwork I've been doing and trying to get the right shape out of my trees. And this is a good time to look at these bald cypress trees, having just defoliated them and then having just trimmed back all those choices within an inch of their lives. I hope wherever you are today that you are enjoying this December 25th. I'm happy about today being. I don't have any family anymore, so I don't really do that. But it doesn't bother me the way it did there for a couple of years either. So if you're in that boat, believe me, it does get better. Also, if you're in that boat, when it gets better, you also start counting your blessings. You still get to enjoy some of the good of the holidays, maybe some time off. Maybe it gets a little extra hectic at work or something, which is case for me, but that makes it go by faster, and that makes coming home all the more nicer. If when you're with your family, that is power and that is joy, unless it isn't. And if it isn't, don't let family torque you out. Not even for a minute. My recommendation is bring a dog and your phone and say, "Oh, my dog needs to go for a walk," and the dog's like, "No, we just," and then you yank the dog outside and y'all go for a walk and maybe watch a bonsai video or something, because that zen and that brings you back to things that are grounded. Like and subscribe if you guys have not already. Our next video will be, I'm kicking around the idea of dragging in a little pine and potting it up and calling it a Christmas tree, but I'm not really a big celebrator of Christmas. But if I pot up a pine tree on Christmas Day, it seems like that would make it a Christmas tree. Everybody else brings home a Christmas tree and turns it into a bonsai. I'm thinking about just taking a pine tree and making it into a bonsai on Christmas Day, and that would be a Christmas Day tree. So that would be a Christmas tree, even though it would be bonsai. Anyway, I may or may not do that, in which case our next spot will be as typical. Saturday. I appreciate you. Frida appreciates you. And thank you guys all so much for watching. Look at those colors.